Hello, I'm Rachel Sambrooks. I'm a writer and comedian, and this is the Stand By Your Nan podcast.
I've been a wild rover for many a year, and I spent all my money on whiskey and beer, and now I'm returning with golden great.
Hello, welcome to episode 5 of the Stand By Your Nan podcast. This episode is dedicated to food, baking, and all things dietary. It's entitled The Gran British Bake Off. You know, baking, that pastime you do with your nan that people only notice if poor Hollywood gives you a handshake. My nan was an actual baker by trade, so I felt it only fair to dedicate some time to asking why it wasn't that valued, and in addition, why she was on a constant diet. To help me answer my questions is my special guest, Seattle-based artist Jacqui Calladine, who also happens to be my cousin. So this is a special episode as two granddaughters talk about our nan and how she inspired us both with artistic endeavours. We're baking Shrewsbury cake from my Nan Eve's stepmum, Alice's recipe book. Oh, that's more of a mouthful than the cakes. Jacqui based an exhibition around the legacy of artisans such as Alice and my nan as well. So check out her work on Instagram at the Wild Creative Studio or at Jacqui Calladine. And now for my take on a great bake. Anecdote. Eve was a baker by trade. She had started as an apprentice hand decorating Kunzel showboats that were tiny chocolate sponge cakes and carried on working in bakers most of her life. There was never a visit without a tin filled with fairy cakes, and she taught me how to bake from a really early age. Sponge cake is in my genes. My bloodstream is filled with buttercream. But just like those genes, I also inherited the middle-aged spread, though mine is Nutella. Nan left a diary of her daily intake of calories, and every day ended with a tot of whiskey and a little fairy cake. I mean, she was kind of a cross between Oliver Reed and My Little Pony, but she lived till 98. Maybe she was pickled. And she was always on a diet that never worked. Oh yes, she would say, you have to stir-fry vegetables with water whilst eating a beef dripping sandwich. As she got older, into her 90s, she got bored of the baking she'd learned as a trade and started to experiment. She decided to make some new flavours. One day we arrived in the back room to a table laden with cold meats and cheese and a freshly baked quiche. Can you guess the secret ingredient? She asked. No, I said. It's sardines and baked beans. I've been cleaning out the pantry. As we all knew, the pantry contained such old ingredients that was also the place where great-grandfather George had left his World War I rations. OK, maybe I won't have that one, Nan. How about bread pudding? She said, clutching a large slab of brown but usually delicious bread pudding. It's the kind of thing they don't sell in Greggs because there's too many calories. It's got a secret ingredient. Oh, I said, even more warily this time. Is it baked beans again? Oh yes, she said, and curry powder. The interview.
We're doing a cooking show.
I've actually got a cooking show island thing.
Actually do that, and you've even got room to put a little cooking with Rachel.
I know, it's exciting. It's like dream come true.
Even if it's just me and you.
Right, I have to do stuff like make sure people know who we are and things. So welcome, Jacqui. Jacqui's my cousin. Where are you actually calling in from?
I am calling in from just outside Seattle, west coast of the USA.
And I'm in South London, so it's a brilliant transatlantic.
It is.
So excited.
Yeah, we're 8 hours different, so it's just coming, well, it's exactly 11 a.m. and I think it's 7 where you are.
Yeah, it's 7 where I am. Yeah, kind of opposite ends of the day. How bizarre.
Yeah, I know, I'm just starting and you're just finishing.
So Yeah, so I'm doing the Stand By Your Nan show as a podcast, as you know. I thought the thing I usually ask at the beginning of the interview bit is to tell me a Nan story, but the thing is, we share the Nan. So instead of that, I was wondering if you might say a little bit about the art exhibition you did. So we've both in a way, explored a similar thing. Like we were both inspired by Eve Hind to do things. Mine's this. And what did you do?
I did. So I did a visual art exhibition where I actually used some of Nan's own paintings. And then I had those digitally copied and blown up and printed onto large pieces of fabric. And then I worked on top of them. So I put in my own work on top of hers. And it was just really cool to do it. And I still have her paintings downstairs. And yeah, she's always there in the background as like a muse. And I think, as you know, as we were growing up and we were in that house all the time, I wasn't really that interested specifically in what she was up to, but her art was just always there, wasn't it? It was like the backdrop to that house. She was making it on the table in the back and upstairs, and then it was on every wall of the house and leaning up the walls. There was so much of it. So I think subconsciously that just became part of how I knew her and how I remembered her, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm the same. And I used to just go in and try and play with all her pastels and paints and stuff. And she was always like, oh no. Because I'd kept...
Yeah, as we are as artists. We don't play, we're doing, this is serious.
So we've got, so there's some recipes. She was a cook in a house, wasn't she? You might know more than me about that because I don't really know.
So Alice was in service, so she was a cook in a house. So this recipe book is really her working out the menus for the family for the next couple of weeks. So there's a lot of, you can see her thought process. She writes things down and then she scrubs it out and then rethinks it, which is nice. But really kind of my interest in that was less of that's my family, but more about, oh, this is a woman at a particular time in history. And I was really interested in how she recorded little bits of information. So in between her work, the recipes, you'll find something like what I assume are her measurements. So it'll be like hips, waist, bust. And I love that little sort of insight into her. And it's exactly what, I mean, Nan did that. She had so many little notebooks. I do exactly the same. I know my mum did. I know my daughter does. And it's interesting, isn't it, how we collect those little bits of information about ourselves quite randomly in little books. And perhaps it's more digital nowadays. I don't know. But
I've got millions. I have millions of notebooks.
Me too. So I was really interested in that, in that book, less as, oh, that's my step great grandmother, but more, oh, this is a record of a woman's life at that time.
Yeah. Because I mean, just the idea of being in service is kind of just bizarre now. But that is where they came from, isn't it? She was in a house. She was cooking for other people, and then she got married and left. And started cooking for her own family, I guess. So we've got the recipe that you sent me from the thing. I think if we get started, because what I was hoping was we might be able to do it whilst chatting in the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think even this little recipe is interesting because it's not sort of laid out as we would expect it nowadays. It's not as specific, is it? No. So it just has a slow oven, whatever that is. I have to work that out.
Well, warm the flour as well, and I had to Google about warming flour. It is a thing. I didn't realise.
I've seen that before in a recipe. So yeah, so it's a pretty standard biscuit recipe, really. But yeah, an English biscuit recipe. I have to caveat that here because they only know cookies.
So if you got started with the cream, so we're going to cream, butter, and sugar.
So you cream the butter and sugar.
I always remember, like, I don't know if it was just because I cooked so many cakes with Nan, But I always remember the 4 ounce rule. Like you have 4 ounces of butter, 4 ounces of sugar, 4 ounces of flour.
Yeah, the proportions. And I don't know if you can actually see that on your copy, Rach, but there is, in pencil by the side of it, she's actually put the proportions.
Ah!
So she's got 1 against the butter, 1 against the sugar, and then the 2 against the flour. So.
Oh, I see. It's ½ pound of flour. I've got that wrong, you know. I'm going to have to put some more flour in. I always found creaming's the hard bit, isn't it? Trying to get it all.
I have to do it by hand. It was just encapsulated. I never do it with a whisk.
And that weirdly, even though she would have done all this, and I can remember Nan being, well, she was a baker by trade, wasn't she? So she knew how to make cakes, but neither of us really eat them as much anymore because you're vegan. And I suspect you're quite healthy as well, Jacqui. I'm assuming that you don't have that much sugar.
I don't know. Well, I mean, of course, just because you're vegan doesn't mean you can't eat rubbish food, because you can. Substitute it with other stuff. But no, I mean, I do still bake a lot, but it's for my own consumption, and it's more really for other people. So I enjoy making cakes for other people. And it's nice to do on your birthday.
Well, I had loads of cake, but the thing is, I'm gluten-free, so I can't eat wheat. And I don't know how, I just don't know how, like, if you did have a problem with wheat back in the day, how you would have got by, because I'm just, you know, if I eat wheat, I get really bad stomach pains and I swell up and things like that.
I suspect the flour was a lot better back then. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, I think if we spoke to Alice now and gave her our dietary requirements, right, shocked. I mean, there's nothing in her notebook about, oh, so and so in the family doesn't eat meat, or so and so doesn't eat gluten. Just everybody got the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember Nan in the 80s though, there was always a fairy cake or a biscuit or something around. Like the bags of broken biscuits that you used to get. If that's like a lot of people, I think, in Birmingham remember that, because must do, because of the Cadbury factory. Like she had a friend at the Cadbury factory, and she'd come back with these kind of like 2
massive
kilogram like bags of biscuits.
And you used to be able to get them at the market as well, didn't you? The boring market. Yeah, we used to love those. There was always a cake. I remember in the pantry she had a tin, and there was always a cake in the tin.
Yeah. I used to love that pantry. I talk about it quite a bit in the show, but like just the things that were in there. Like I definitely remember that there was some World War I rations that she used to get out. I never found out what was in them. But it was always like, oh, we'll eat that because it's in a tin. It'll be all right.
Well, I remember there was always some concoction that she'd made. That sometimes worked, sometimes didn't. But there was always stuff like her own jams and her own chutneys.
Do you remember the wine?
Yes. Oh my goodness. And the bread. She used to make her own bread that weighed like a brick, but super healthy.
Always remember dripping sandwiches after you'd have your roast beef all day, and then just before you have your roast dinner, you'd have a dripping sandwich because it was warm in the pan. And
yes, oh my gosh, yeah, we did that. Mum used to do that too. Yeah.
I think I've got creamed.
Yeah, that's fine. And if it changes colour and it's whiter, then
yeah, I think it's going. Yeah, I still don't use, like, I've got an electric whisk and things like that, but I still don't use it because it kind of feels a bit like you're cheating somehow. And I think it was Nan that told me about the thing that you put the egg in, but put a little bit of flour in as well.
Yeah, stop it spitting. Yeah.
I've got
my egg.
And this is where I get my cooking show. So I've just added an egg. It's not beaten, it's just an egg. And then flavouring. So I got some vanilla. Have you got any flavouring?
I've actually gone for caraway seeds.
I've just got some vanilla bean paste. It's always really nice. So. I didn't have any fancy cutters. She says you have to cut out with fancy cutters after you've rolled it. But have you got anything like that?
I've got a round fluted fancy cutter.
I'm just doing an upside down jar.
a wine glass will work just as well.
I am really fascinated by how they grew up, because I know Grandad was in kind of back-to-back housing, wasn't he?
He was. Yeah, I don't have a lot of information about that. I don't know. I think kind of when I did that art project and I was using some of the family references, I was trying quite hard not to make it too personal and about just our family. So I didn't do a lot of research other than, what was like there in my face and in all the books and reference material I had. Because I didn't really want it to become sort of like, a personal investigation into my family history. I'm very much more about moving forward, and I didn't kind of want to get lost in the whole history of stuff. And I've also, the older I get, I realise just how much myth surrounds a lot of family issues anyway, and it's really hard to actually find the truth about things.
Yeah, so, I think it's like, it is really hard, isn't it? And I was always thinking, like, even though I started this off as a kind of almost like a memoir show, because I wanted to talk about Nan's like slightly weird occupations that she got involved with her kind of spiritual things she did, and I was really interested in that. And then I realised that because she didn't really talk about it much, there wasn't a lot of information. And it is like memory is so fallible, and your own family histories are to do with who's telling it. Like that's the perspective it's told from. So as the more I've done this, even though obviously I really enjoy the kind of social history aspect of it, like I like finding out a little bit about how people lived and things like that. It isn't, like you say, it isn't that cut and dried. It's more about what's the collective memory, really, like what are our personal histories and how do we remember it. And it's also really, when you're talking about grandmothers, you're really talking about yourself as a child. That's what I realised.
Yeah, and also I think for me also, who am I going to be as a grandmother, hopefully, if I am one in the future. But yeah, because I think, for me, I was really interested in stuff like, she started off one of Birmingham's first recycling events, that kind of side of things. But I think when I talked to my mum about some of this, I think for my mum as a child, with Eve as her mum, it was quite embarrassing for her, because I think Eve did stuff that was different. And Mum told a story about her having to go the other side of Birmingham to buy Nan some yogurt from a little health food shop, because yogurt just wasn't in your normal corner shop, not like it is nowadays. And I think Mum just found some of that just really embarrassing.
Yeah. No, I remember that story. I just thought, isn't it?
So interesting, isn't it? I think that's really cool that she was like that. But as the daughter, it must have been a bit embarrassing, just like we get embarrassed about our own parents and our kids are embarrassed about us sometimes.
Yeah.
You forget, don't you, that relationship?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that whole thing about her being into yoga, that
Yeah.
now it just seems really normal. But I remember it back then, it was like, oh no, she's so embarrassing, this kind of hippie.
That, yeah.
Are you rolling out already? Are you there?
I am rolling out. Yeah, this might
Um,
be because it's quite warm in here.
my flour's not is gluten free, so it doesn't always do the business. But
Very short.
yeah, hopefully it'll work. And then yeah, I have to remember to keep talking. I'm going to have to do a lot of editing on this.
It's hard. It's hard to talk.
It's hard. Gordon Ramsay, eat your heart out. He's really good, isn't he? Things about her, like she didn't really value her baking skills and all those kind of like women's work things. They just weren't valued, were they? But now thinking about it, it's amazing.
I think it was just second nature, wasn't it? I mean, I thought she was incredible for all that stuff that she did, like you say, going to yoga, recycling, all those, her interest in spirituality. But that and cooking and making everything from scratch and growing all her herbs in the garden, or stuff that perhaps we thought of as very forward thinking. But of course, she the time when she grew up, that was just normal. That's just what you did. It wasn't weird. That's what you did, like that wartime child. And so I think you kind of have to see her life in context with what was happening around her.
Yeah, because when you think about that she went through the Second World War and had, did she have more than one child? She definitely had at least one child during the Second World War. That's
Mm-hmm.
that must have been really difficult. But I
Yeah.
guess we got a yeah, it must have been so kind of anxious making. But that was just something you did, wasn't it? It was what people got on with it. And
Yeah. And well, didn't she have them all at home? Weren't they all three of them were born at home, I think.
yeah.
So, I mean, I can't even imagine that now.
Just and it wasn't. They didn't have the NHS, did they? So it would have just been, well,
She
you
never
know.
talked about that so much, did she? She didn't really talk about. Well, yeah, it was just something that she did, but she was very much that kind of pragmatic character, wasn't she?
I know. I know my mum always had like homeopathy and things like that. So I just think they used to have to do lots of herbal remedies or whatever else in order to get by. I'm
Yeah.
not sure I'm going to be able to. Mine's kind of falling apart.
Falling over. You could just press it into a shape.
I think it might have to. I've managed to use my jar. Oh, mine's all falling apart.
Yeah, I remember she used to make a lot of her herbal remedies. Because I remember going around and she'd have some really foul tasting things that she'd say, taste this. Some stuff she wouldn't even eat herself, but she convinced us it was good for us.
Was it a pint of green, which was cabbage water?
Awful. I mean, she had a sense of humour about it, though.
Yeah,
she was
did.
like, "Oh, you must have this," and I think she'd giggle and laugh as we were trying it. So I think she was aware of her own foibles.
Yeah.
But now, that would just be, she would be thought of as, that's just so forward thinking. That's just how we should be eating.
Well, the hilarious thing was, I always thought that was a kind of strange thing to her, that pint of green. And then I went, I did the show in Brighton, and someone in the audience went, "Oh yes, everyone had pints of green," like it was completely normal. Why are you talking about that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. But I mean, what I do hope is that well, number one, I eventually am a grandmother, but that my house feels as welcoming and as interesting as hers did, because there was always something to look at, wasn't there?
Yeah.
I never thought, oh, I've got to go and visit. Gran. It was always an exciting thing to do.
Because I remember her reciting poetry and things all the time. Because she told me she wanted to be in the music halls, but she wanted to be lots of different things. Like she quite
Yeah, I think that's great. Actually reminds me of myself, because I have that kind of, I can't settle on one thing.
So I'm going to put these in the oven for 20 minutes. It says.
20 minutes in a slow oven. Whatever
that just means like.
Well, I've got mine. Are you in a gas oven?
No, it's electric. I'm going to put it on 140, which I think is quite low.
It is low, yeah.
So if I stick it in.
So I cheated and I looked up this recipe, a modern version, and it said 170.
Oh, right.
But I am going to put mine in a little lower.
Quite a lot of my dough has ended up on the rolling thing, but never mind.
I'm actually going to put mine for 15 minutes. I'm not convinced it'll take 20.
I'm really interested in your wild creative kind of projects that you do, Jacqui, that you're so kind of into ecology in the garden and using using stuff from the garden, and I do think that's something that comes from that generation as well, like making vegetables, and you use them as dyes, don't you, in your...
Well, I do think that actually in a way Nan is the original wild creative. When I think of, if there's a persona that's a wild creative woman, it would be her. But yeah, I mean, there's a little picture of me I'm probably 2 years old, and I'm picking petals off Dad's precious roses that he loved to grow. And that kind of sums me up and what I've done with my art ever since, really. Because I used to, how you used to make that awful perfume out of rose petals and water when you were a kid? You thought it was great, but it was really horrible. And I'm still doing that now. I use petals and plants, and I use them as pigments. And I use some minerals as well now. So I kind of developed a way of working that was very much in harmony with the earth, and not just using natural materials, but also trying to work with the actual timing of the seasons. So allowing myself some downtime in the winter, and spring right now is sort of my time for new ideas, working out, right, what could I do this year? Who do I want to work with? What new things could I be investigating? And then in the summer, that's my growing time. That's when I usually make my work. And then autumn's very much about harvesting. So kind of reflecting on what I've done, sharing the work in community. And it's just given me a really nice rhythm to work to. And I think for so many years, I felt like I wasn't doing enough, that I didn't do enough work, I didn't produce enough, I didn't sell enough, I wasn't making a piece of artwork every day like some people are. And I think social media has been awful for that as well, because there's so many challenges now, 30-day challenge, make a piece of work every day. I don't want to do that. I don't want to churn out work. I want to make things that are very meaningful to me and hopefully to other people. And I think sometimes you have to slow down to do that. It's not about making art or writing or whatever you're doing. It's not about making as much as you possibly can. I think it's about making pieces that are meaningful and have some depth and thought and love behind them. So since I started doing that, which I guess is just over 10 years now, I feel like I just have a much better creative practice. And even if I don't sell a lot some years, or I don't make as much one year as I do the previous, it doesn't really matter, because it's a bit like, it's like growing your garden. Some years things bloom really well and other years they don't, because of circumstances and what's happening. So I think I'm more accepting now of my creative side and my practice and what I produce from it. So it's definitely been a positive for me.
I just think that's wonderful. What a great...
Yeah. And it's developed into all kinds of different things. I do some workshops now, and it changes all the time, just as we do, and just as our life does. It's had to you don't stay the same person, so I don't think your art should stay the same throughout your life.
Getting these biscuits out.
So I've got 2 minutes left on my timer.
Ooh.
But that was 15 minutes, so. Or a minute now. A minute left.
No, mine aren't ready yet. I think they look like they might fall apart.
You've got yours on a lower temperature. I've got mine at 170.
Oh, have you? Okay. Well, yeah, so the last question I always ask everyone, which you've kind of answered anyway, but I'm going to ask it you again, is what kind of like old grandmother, if you became a grandmother, or what kind of older woman do you see yourself as?
I think if I was like Nan, that would be perfect. Quite happy. I'm getting more like her all the time. I mean, every piece of clothing I have has a little bit of paint on it, and I remember that. Even my best clothes. Yeah, I think. Well, just having a house, I think that's a home to everyone. I really feel that that was the case with her house, and that was one of the saddest things I feel when she passed away and that house moved on. And I think we all said the same. That was the party house, wasn't it? It was the house where everybody always gathered, to be in the centre of the family in that way. And then just doing what she damn well pleased. That was such a privilege for her. Well, my time is going. I think, yeah, spending my time doing what I want to do, painting, walking, being in nature all the time, seeing my friends and family. No huge aspirations, really. I mean, I don't know if Nan had anything that she never achieved in her life that she really wanted to do. She never expressed that, did she? She was well travelled. And she went to art school later on in life. I think she was in her 60s when she went and studied. So I think she did everything that she wanted to do.
She got a degree in her 80s, I know that much.
That's right. It took her that long, 20 years.
There was one thing that she never managed to do, because she told me about it, apart from being a music hall performer, was what she wanted to be when she was little. The other thing was she wanted to be a clippy on the buses. Yeah, so I did a poem about that. People love it. And I just thought, yeah, it's really bizarre. She told me that she wanted to be a clippy because of World War II coming in. The women were going to do the men's jobs, but then she got pregnant, so she could never do it.
Oh.
But then I thought, isn't that weird? Like, you didn't really value all the baking that you did, and because she used to work. Mum told me this actually, that she decorated Kunzel's showboats, and like that was just a trade, whereas being clippy was like the dream. So yeah.
I guess because being in the kitchen, that was woman's work, wasn't it? And it wasn't seen as something that was valuable.
Yeah, but as we can see, it's still valuable, however many hundreds of years.
Well, let's see how edible these are.
How edible these Shrewsbury cakes are.
My time has just gone off, so I'm going to check mine.
Oh, we'll get them out and then we'll see how they are. I'll see if mine have worked.
It smells good. It's quite short. Very crumbly.
Yours come out, mine haven't, so I'm just going to leave them in there for the family of the big house to eat later. Let's have a look at yours. Can we see one?
Oh, good. Can you see them?
Oh, wow. They look great.
A couple of minutes to... Well, actually, you wouldn't have had them browned, so I think they're fine. I might sprinkle them with a bit of sugar.
Fantastic. Thank you to my guest Jacqui Calladine, my cousin and brilliant wild artist. You can find her on Instagram at Jacqui Calladine. We did both bake those Shrewsbury cakes and they were delicious. So I will be posting the recipe for that on the podcast website, standbyyournan.podbean.com. It always annoyed me that Nan was on a diet, even in her 80s. I thought it suited her to be rotund. She was quite obsessed with health food, though. She just wanted to be healthy, and she ate fresh veg from the garden and a lot of cake. But I think she was healthy in her way. She did keep going till she was nearly 100. Perhaps we've moved too far away from fresh food and freshly baked Shrewsbury cakes. I'm off to eat mine with a nice cup of tea and think about growing my own veg. It's the little things. Ta-ra, Abyss. Stand By Your Nan has been written and performed by Rachel Sambrooks, co-produced with Steve Keyworth, and with music by Lewis Barfoot. It's a Gertie Words production funded by Arts Council England.
I never will play the wild rover no more, and it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more will I play wild rover. No, never, no more. I went to an alehouse I used to frequent, and I told the landlady my money was spent. I asked her for credit, she answered